Hello and very warm welcome to the Arise interview, 60 glorious minutes of multifaceted discussion where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things, and we feature the voices at the heart of the stories. I am Christian Ogdo. Thanks so very much for joining us. Coming up in the next hour, as the Cyril Ramaphosa regime continues to justify xenophobic attacks on Nigerians and other African foreigners living in South Africa by calling them drug addicts and traffickers, can this be the basis for tarnishing the image of Nigerian immigrants? We'll speak to our top-notch panel on the unabating xenophobic attacks. And South Africa's biggest city, that's Johannesburg and other areas, were hit by a surge of attacks against businesses owned by migrants last week. The recent violence soured ties between South Africa and Nigeria, which summoned Pretoria's envoy and boycotted an economic summit in Cape Town in protest. As a result of these attacks, there were lots of reprisal attacks against South African businesses in Nigeria and other African countries. Now, there have been questions rising whether South African President Cyril Ramaphosa is handling the issue very well, or rather, has he lost grip over the people he governs? Well, in a moment we'll speak to our panel, but first, here is the president of the Economic Freedom Fighters, President Julius Malema, blaming white people for the xenophobic attack.
Forgive us. We come from a traumatized past and we are struggling in finding ourselves. We are still in the process of soul searching and will ultimately one day know that we are part of Africa. Our oppressors, those who have taken away our brains and mind, are the ones who have instilled in us the hatred of our fellow African brothers and sisters. It is not of our own making. We are still working on ourselves because they've said to us, we are better than Africa, and some amongst us still think exactly like that. We'll soon realize that we are nothing without our continent. We have no any other home except this continent. If things go bad here in South Africa, we will only be received well and properly in other parts of African continent like they did before. It will not be for the first time. The Nigerians opened their gates, Zimbabweans, Mozambicans, Swaziland, Botswana, the Lesotho people, Zambian people, Tanzanian people, Angola, they opened their gates and welcomed us. The people of Lesotho were bombed and killed by apartheid government looking for us. And after those bombings, they never said, hey, we're no longer part of this nonsense. They continued to provide entrance as a frontline state for our guerrillas to come and wage a war against the murderous regime of apartheid.
That was Julius Malema, president of the Economic Freedom Party. They're blaming whites for the xenophobic attack on Nigerians and other African migrants. Well, for more on all that, I am now being joined in the studios by the former Consul General to Nigeria's mission in Atlanta and retired Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Joe Keshi, and Barrister Daniel Bwala, who is a legal practitioner and a member of the All Progressives Congress, as well as a member of the Lincoln Inn. Gentlemen, very warm welcome again. Let me start with the Ambassador, because of your vast knowledge of diplomacy and the rest. Are you surprised that the xenophobic attacks and incidents is still, rocketing? Is not subsiding?
Well, candidly, to a large extent, I think I am surprised. but a couple of things I think it's going on here. Number one, you begin to see the failure of leadership. You know, when you find where leaders fail to arrest a situation, and rather than employ the instrument of state to arrest a situation, but because of their own failure or failures, they now begin to find a way of covering up. And in this case, one thing still to hold foreigners responsible, when foreigners are not actually responsible for the perceived
Economic downturn,
economic
impoverishment
downturn,
of
or
the people.
for the poverty or for the lack of education of those who are responsible and those who are threatening to kill everybody. So it's a failure of leadership. I watched, you know, I think it was Al Jazeera yesterday that was reporting, you know, and you could see the lazy manner in which the South African police, they were patrolling the streets. A leadership that really wants to stop this, you know, incidents would have taken a very clear stand, which we've not found from the, you know, from the South African authorities. You find the president saying something. You find the deputy minister of police, the deputy minister of police in particular, who should be mobilizing the police to restore order, is doing nothing, rather blaming, you know, the foreigners, the minister of foreign affairs or the deputy blaming the foreigners. And it is not the fault of the foreigners that they have this situation is, you know, partly because, again, when I was here last time, I keep making the point that those responsible for these attacks are those who feel that the dismantling of the apartheid system has left them behind. Look, one of the cases they keep making was the fact that during the apartheid regime, they were working in the mines and they were being paid, you know, quite some. But now that foreigners are in South Africa, the mine owners are prepared to pay lesser to foreigners who are willing to accept the price. Now, do you blame foreigners who've come to a country to make money or to do some job?
Because they're economic migrants,
they're economic migrants. This is a thing that the South African government would have engaged the mining companies. But the most important thing with respect to this crisis is that they should have sent the police to the streets to restore law and order. They have the means. And where you are allowed, look, it has happened in this way, and in a number of countries, where you are allowed non-state powers to engage in violence, it naturally gets out of hand, and you know, and that's what we are going to see in South Africa.
Absolutely. Bwala, I mean, as a lawyer, you know, member of the Lincoln Inn too, what he has said, with the police, those who are supposed to secure life and property are now being complicit of fueling this ember of violence. Does that not portend a gradual glide or slide to a state of anarchy?
Not in South Africa. And that's why, from the intelligence perspective, I only hope that this violence or xenophobic attack by the South Africans are not covert operations by the government of South Africa, and which is the reason why they are some sort of complicit in the way they deal with a crime in the state. I mean, to begin with, xenophobic attack is a crime. South Africa is a society we have always known as one that maintains law and order. When it is a matter that concerns the citizens of South Africa, you will see their police system effectively working. When it's a matter that concerns the judicial process in South Africa, you see their courts operating successfully. So the question now is, why is it that as it concerns the non-citizens of South Africa, suddenly the South African police are not effective? Suddenly the South African judiciary, there is not confidence and trust in the judicial system of South Africa. That is why the people decided to approach, to give it a jungle justice approach. Now,
what I know that in the judicial system there, there is no capital punishment.
Right.
You know, so it does make a lot of them to want to take the laws into their hands because they know maybe after 10, 15 years, they go on parole.
So my point is, I agree with that, but my point is, because we know that the judicial system is working, so if the suggestion by the South African citizens that the reason why they are acting or reacting is because Nigerians or foreigners are dealing with drugs, for instance, why shouldn't the law enforcement in South Africa arrest this individual and prosecute them in South African courts? And where necessary, even export and deport them to their respective countries. I think it's the cost of the black man. That even if all the foreigners leave South Africa now, the South Africans are more likely to still fight amongst themselves. A lot of people have given the blame to leadership. But if you look at the economy of South Africa and the way governance is operated in South Africa, to a large extent, it's far more than other African countries where you don't see this xenophobic attack. That is why some of us believe that the government of South Africa is responsible. The other time when this incident happened and people were talking about reprisal in Nigeria, I saw a video clip of how some youth in Lagos, I think, sort of blocked a car, that was conveying some Chinese nationals. In less than 3-4 minutes, the same law enforcement in Nigeria that will always complain they are not effective, in 4 minutes they were able to disperse the people and save the people. But if you see the case in South Africa, they always show up after the fact. And that is why some of us believe that the solution to this is, number one, our foreign policy. I think that the foreign affairs minister has his job cut out for him. That is number one. The person who is in charge of diaspora communication, diaspora issues also have a job.
Yeah.
Thank you, the commission cut out for her. People do not regard the lives of the Nigerians as anything serious. It is not just in South Africa, anywhere in the world. So from the legal standpoint, I would want to look at it from the perspective that if this government is serious, and I believe they are, is for us to begin to think of ways in which we will isolate South Africa. We lead like what the Americans call, when they want to go to war and they want to carry other nations with them, they call it
coalition.
Coalition. We need to have a coalition in Africa.
Coalition of the willing.
Oh, yes, in Africa, because this is not just against Nigeria, but against foreigners who are mostly people from the African descent.
Okay, we just got to about a minute, to go on break. How would you assess Julius Malema's claim that it's the whites that are causing the xenophobic attacks and the violence?
I think his point is, I wouldn't say he's perfectly right, because his point is that the failure of the white to invest in South Africa is the reason why the South Africans are transferring their aggression to Africa.
The investments are there.
Thank you. So
South Africa is the second largest economy in Africa, followed by Egypt.
Exactly.
Nigeria is first.
That's right. Except if you can show that there is a conspiracy by the whites from the intelligence perspective that they are fueling this type of crisis, then I will agree with that.
We've got just 20 seconds, Ambassador. You want to...
I think what he's saying is the fact that the whites have really not relinquished, and I'm using that word liberally now, their stronghold on the economy in a way that opportunities are created.
Are spread
for a number of,
the people.
The people.
Okay, let me just put you on pause so that when we return from this commercial break, would examine that and see the possibility of that really being an influence in the xenophobic attacks. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead, including as we continue our chat with that top-notch panel on the xenophobic attacks on immigrants in South Africa, would be looking at other plausible causes and influences. Stay with us. You're welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the news makers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I am Christian Ogodo. Thanks for staying with us. We still have in the studios two gentlemen. Daniel Boala, on my immediate left, is a lawyer and member of the Lincoln Inn, and Ambassador Joe Keshe, former Consul General at Nigerians Mission in Atlanta, as well as a retired permanent secretary in the Federal Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Yeah, you were trying to give explanations, you know, to the Malema's twist about the whites, you know, being part or fueling the xenophobic attack. You want to expatiate on that?
I think the message he's trying to get out is that, look, it is unfair to blame foreigners, particularly the blacks, whose businesses are on the streets, the shop owners, the convenience store holders, and so on. But those who control over 80% of the economy, who have not done much to open up the economy and create opportunities. He's trying to also say in a way that if the South African government had done to a large extent what Mugabe did, despite all the condemnation, had focused on education and building the capacity
of the people.
Particularly like this. Look, when you look at the characters involved, they are relatively young people. They all complain about lack of employment. They all complain about the fact that
the youths are, you know, getting...
And that the Africans have taken, you know, the question is, what was going on, or how did the Africans take over your streets? Nigerians or Africans did not bring drugs. They were selling drugs there before they came. And if you know how the drug market runs, you know, a powerful group comes and takes over and begin to run the, you know, And I think when I was here the last time, I made the point. Anywhere there's a drug business, the police are involved. And that's why they kind of, you know, turn the other...
The blind eye.
The blind eye on the other side. But the truth of the matter remains that it is the consistent failure of leadership, number one, to anticipate that this crisis is going to take place. And you order the police, I do not want a crisis, make sure you deal with this situation. They will.
Yeah.
But where they have refused to act, for me, they are just covering up their own failures and using foreigners as an excuse. What is wrong in sending all the police folks you have into the regions where these crises are, you know, to maintain law and order? By the way, you have the guns. These guys only have matches and sticks. So they are not ready to do the needful to resolve this crisis. And that's the challenge I think everybody today faces. But I'll go so far as to say that, look, we can if we want to. And I've had my own experience. We can, if we want to, bring back all Nigerians in South Africa home. I make a prediction that in under 1 month, once the situation is done, they will go back. I was involved in Sierra Leone. We repatriated people. They came back less than 2-3 weeks later when there was
calm.
When there was calm, everybody virtually came back. It was like we gave them a free ride home. Because when you bring them home, what are they going to do?
Let me give you a perspective.
Okay.
In support of what he's saying, but a little departure from the point. Still coming back to the point highlighted by Malema. Because if you follow hook, line, and sinker, the comment of Malema, then you are going to have the citizens or the people in South Africa turn their aggression now away from Africans to the white. Because then the point is the white man is the reason why your economy is sort of tight. But let me give you a point. More than 65% of investment in England is not by the English people. It is foreign investment in England. If you go to the streets of London, you move around, you are likely to come to a conclusion that more than 65% of the faces and shops you see around London are not owned by the British people. So what is the issue? In England, what they do is that they strengthen their regulation. So you can tax these companies and give education to your people. You can tax this company and provide comprehensive health care to your people. You can as well bring regulatory framework that will give strength to your people in participating in the economy, because one of the hallmarks of a free economy is competition. Your people have to compete. Because take for instance, I saw one of the clip, one said the Nigerians are carrying drugs because suddenly a Nigerian comes, he starts a business and then you see him riding big cars. Why are Nigerians, who are also Africans, are not white, competing favorably in South Africa and even beating the South African people? I think the government of South Africa should look at their laws. There are much more you can do with your laws that will give advantage to your people to participate in the economy and then to be able to seize the power that you have. Because the political will is with the people of South Africa. You have the political will, the judiciary is that of South Africa, you have the legislature in South Africa. How can you have executive, legislature, and the judiciary and say you do not have the power to convert the economy of your country for the benefit of your people?
To emancipate the people. Okay, very good submissions there. Let's quickly take some of the latest reactions we're getting from Nigeria's parliament now, because the devastating effects of the xenophobic attacks have made foreign business owners whose shops have been destroyed to express themselves further, saying they've had enough and want the South African government to do something about the violence. However, in Nigeria, lawmakers of the lower chamber of parliament, also known as the House of Representatives, have issued a stern warning on the xenophobic violence in South Africa. The Speaker of the House, Femi Gbajabiamila, emphasized the importance of protecting all citizens wherever they find themselves. Also, the chairman, Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, Abike Abiri Erewa, says the South African government should compensate Nigerians affected by xenophobic attacks. Let's hear her.
We intend not only to determine the causes of these latest events, but also to assess and account for the losses in life and property that have occurred. This will allow the government to more accurately demand reparations to compensate our citizens who suffered in this recent orgy of violence.
As I speak with you now, we have 640 Nigerians voluntarily registered to come home, and they will be home in a couple of days. And we believe that more will still be coming to register, but right now we have 640. That means 2 planes will convey them home starting from a couple of days. Now, again, with the envoy will be briefing the president. So with the envoys briefing to the president and having everything in place, Mr. President will be taking a few more decisions, but we have to wait for the briefing from the envoy. But in the meantime, we continue to demand compensation for Nigerians that have been attacked in South Africa. And also, we know that 8 policemen have been charged to court for their involvement in killings of Nigerians in South Africa, and I think 4 more have been recently arrested. We are demanding that these investigations must end.
Okay, Ambassador, we just heard the chairperson of the Nigerian Diaspora Commission there. Compensation. The AU was still waiting for a statement from the African Union on the xenophobic attack. I mean, pursuing the issue of compensation and the rest without the AU's input, how does it come? How would it materialize?
No, I'm actually, I don't know. I actually have not seen any statement from the AU.
That's what I said, yeah.
And I'm surprised at this, because this is not just focused on Nigeria.
Nigeria alone, no.
This affects quite a number of people from other parts of Africa, and unfortunately more people around South Africa itself, the southern African states, and,
who belong to SADC.
Yes, and East Africa. I think all these organizations should honestly begin to engage the South African government. And I think this is an issue I've said before, that the AU must put on the table for it to be discussed, and a collective, action taken on this issue. The issue of compensation is okay, but for now, that won't be my main focus, because number one, you got to protect the lives and properties. You got to ensure that the people are safe, and this is why we need to engage the South African authorities to first of all calm the situation down. It is only then you begin to assess and talk about the issue of compensation. When you add compensation into the mix, good as it is, it could also backfire because, again, it might even give some miscreants to begin to argue that, you see,
to fuel the
situation and so on. Good as it is, there's always a timing on which you begin to discuss certain issues.
Okay.
So for me, the engagement that Mr. President has ordered, the arrival of the briefing of the special envoy, we don't know exactly what but he should provide the Minister of Foreign Affairs enough ammunition to craft the next line of action to engage the South African authorities. But we must continue to engage them. That should be our focus for now.
Okay. We just got a minute to break. I know you definitely have so much to say. But say all that you can say now about the compensation issue, and when we return from the commercial break, we'll say
my thinking is there will never be a compensation. That's why they made it clear that they will not. We need to toughen and strengthen our foreign policy. Most of these African countries where their nationals are affected have been looking onto Nigeria for leadership. And I think that what is happening in South Africa clearly indicates a change of baton and a greater burden on Nigeria to rise in the African soil as a leader, because this is going to be the foundation of many more crises to come. We need to strengthen our foreign policy. For now, there is no regard for the life of Nigerians anywhere in the world. We need to back up our words with action. There are South African investment here. There are many more ways you can get this same money from South African investment here by the rule of law, not necessarily having to engage the South Africa to get.
Would that not be a vicarious liability
Sometimes
when an incident happens? So, okay, let's go on break first, then we'll re-examine it. You're watching the Arise interview. We've still got plenty more to talk on the xenophobic attacks. Stay with us. You're welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I am Christian Ogodo. Thanks for staying with us. And with the whole bitterness and outrage expressed by the South Africans, who do we blame for it? A country that several African countries stood behind during the anti-apartheid struggle, has now turned its back against those who once stood to defend them. During the apartheid era in South Africa, Nigeria played a crucial role by fully supporting the apartheid movement and the African National Congress. Well, at least I still remember Nigeria being a member of the SWAPO, the frontline states, yeah, even supporting SWAPO too and the rest, and this helped it led to the dismantling of the apartheid regime. In March 1960, for example, 69 black people were massacred in the Sharpeville massacre in South Africa by the white apartheid police. The reaction to that incident by Nigerian leaders changed everything in South Africa from then on. A letter sent then by the then Prime Minister Abubakar Tafawa Balewa to the ANC emphasized Nigeria's commitment to the fight against apartheid in South Africa. Well, in a moment, we're going to continue our extensive discussion with our panel, but first, here is spoken word poetry by the renowned D.K. Chukwumerije in response to the xenophobic violence in South Africa.
Dear South Africans, I don't get you guys. We never enslaved you. We never left our homes, came to yours to colonize you. We did not cause the wounds that left those scars on your black bodies. We are not the source of the nightmares that wake you up at night drenched in sweat. Dear South Africans, we never oppressed you. We did not take Sarah Batman and turn her into a circus animal. We never suppressed you. We did not gun you down in Sharpeville or Soweto. We are not the ones that murdered Steve Biko. We did not take Madiba and throw him in jail for 27 years. We never stole your lands. We did not desecrate your gods. dear South Africans. Instead, when you wept, we wept with you. When you marched, we marched with you. When you raised fists in defiance, in solidarity, we did the same for you. We took your cause into meetings to which you were not invited, banged the table for you, shouted your name into the face of neocolonialism. Because you were our brother, we did not abandon you in that pit. Instead, each time we heard your voice coming out of the darkness, singing in defiance, we sang that song with you. Nkosi sikele li Africa. Malubangani sumbondo wayo. Yizwahili tanga soyetu kosi.
That's a very touchy, very powerful poetry there, all in support of South Africa and the rest. But I said I was going to ask you, Ambassador. I'm just reading Thabo Mbeki's statement just a few days ago at the WEF here, where he says that, the laws should be toughened too in South Africa, whether against, the allegations of drugs peddling and sales or against the demonstrators, but the laws must be toughened. And Daniel here is saying that Nigeria's foreign policy laws are not toughened and strengthened enough. I said, you were once a policy maker implementing the views of government. Would you agree with that submission?
Well, let me first say 2 or 3 things quickly to you. First, to Chukwumeride's poetry. I wish that was coming from the leaders of Nigeria and South Africa. Because you see, I've repeatedly made this point that during the apartheid regime, it was against the law to quote the ANC or to report on the ANC. So many people inside South Africa really did not know what the rest of the continent did for them. Again, unlike the white countries that have missions there and provided NGOs with some help, no African country had a mission at that time. So they knew what quite a number of European countries did, because the embassies were there.
They had presence.
They had presence. They were helping, here and there. We were not on the ground. So many people did not know. So when you find situations like this, it is such powerful voices that we should be put out there to reach out to the people, to remind the people of the ANC, particularly the leaders, both Mbeki and Ramaphosa, who live with us here in Lagos.
In Lagos.
This country took care of them. They should not forget yesterday, because there's still tomorrow for everybody. They should not.
But the second, third generation South Africans are not educated. So how are you going to sing such message?
Look, they should have had the responsibility from day one to make it clear. On the last time I was there, I made the case that one of the mistakes, in my view, that South Africa made, the leaders, was that at the dismantling of the apartheid regime, they thought that because the world was hailing the dismantling, that they were now the new kids on the block. And it was just, look, carry, as we say in this Nigeria, carry go. And they just, took over with an air of superiority and everything. And look, whatever happened, we are the leader.
We are the owners of the land.
We are the owners of the land. We are the owners of the continent. We are and everywhere you go to it, South Africa. In a way, I think that created some illusion. And now that illusion is being dismantled by a number of things, poor leadership in South Africa, the economy going down, and this crisis, I guess they themselves are surprised and unable to know what to do. Now, with regards to the question of our foreign policy, The issue is not so much one of foreign policy in the sense that you cannot stop our people from traveling to wherever they want to go to. Number two, the point he has made, which is in a way the point I've been emphasizing, is that we need to build a coalition, a collective action. This is not something Nigeria alone can deal with. And I have no doubt that the foreign ministry is looking at that possibility, because the people from Zambia, Botswana, Zimbabwe,
Congo, DR,
everybody
involved.
is involved. So we need to build that, But we also have to make a distinction between the period that you refer to under the military and now, because in another discussion, people have been saying, oh, nationalize South African entities in Nigeria. No, we no longer live in that era. It was easy, very easy in those days, to nationalize BP. Today, it will be very difficult for you to say you want to nationalize, Chevron or Shell or
ExxonMobil.
Or even say, look, we are going to take over all the entities of ShopRite. They are probably Nigerian owned. So the challenge we face really as a country is not so much foreign policy, but to begin to ask ourselves, what is responsible for Nigerians living in the country in droves? We need to look at the mirror. If we have made our country livable, governable, we've provided security, we've opened up opportunity. Look, the people of this country are not lazy, for goodness sake. This afternoon, I was saying to my wife, we went to some new areas, and I saw every little drive. You see women with kids behind them. Look, anytime you start a project somewhere,
there's commerce there.
There's commerce.
Those who will come and cook, those who will come and
vend and everything. Yeah. Some housewives, as soon as they see that opportunity, they follow it. But when you have this air of entitlement in places like South Africa, and they believe that everything must be given to them free. Oh, look, Nigerians did not invent the drugs. They did not invent this. We're
not a drug-producing country.
Fine. There were drugs. They were selling drugs. Look, there's an analysis that actually indicated that Nigerians are just lower
the ladder.
At the ladder. The main fellows who, by the way, the big question: how do the drugs get into South Africa? Even if Nigerians are importing those drugs, where are the custom authorities? Even if Nigeria is bringing it through the border, where are the South African authorities? These are questions that South Africans themselves must ask and begin to see that the problem is not the foreigners. The problem is that repeatedly they have failed
the people.
Look, once upon a time, a taxi driver told me this. I've never forgotten this. This was when they were trying to remove this same Mbeki. And I said, look, how can you people replace Mbeki with a Zuma? He said to me, Mbeki is good for the economy. Zuma is good for the people. But today, both the economy and the people, the leadership that is good for the economy and the people have just failed the people. So look, again, I'm convinced in my mind that until they take control of the situation, until they begin to enlighten the people, today nobody in South Africa is speaking up to tell except Julius. Nobody is speaking up to educate the South Africans. Nobody is talking to the people, to the rioters, to say, no, you are turning your arms against, your guns against, or your knives, or cutlasses against the wrong people. That you need to slow down, let's have a meeting. Nobody is doing that.
Absolutely. Okay, Ambassador Joe Keshi, would come back in a moment. We'll have some commercial messages, but just to put you on notice that ShopRite is not just a franchise, and it's not owned by Nigerians. It only employs Nigerians. It's a South African brand and franchise.
Okay, we come back.
Yes. When we return, you're still watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still to come. Stay with us. All right, welcome back to the Arise interview, and thanks so very much for staying with us. You Bwala, you heard Ambassador,
Right.
Keshi still talking about the economic doldrums, that has really fueled, because it's majorly the economy and lack of education.
Right.
The people are not, but that the policies, Nigeria's foreign policies are okay, but this situation now, Nigeria can't do it alone. We need a coalition, like
Right.
said the other time, in tone the other time.
Yeah.
How can this really work with the OAU, looking like looking like a lame dog, and they've
Right.
not said anything more than a week after?
So Nigeria is like America in the world. You take
As in
the place
Africa.
in Africa, you take the place of leadership. One of the ways America promotes their foreign policy is by ensuring that there is sanction for any country that does anything that inhibits the progress, the national interest of
And
America.
even invades the country
So-
if they like.
So Nigerian foreign policy can never be enough. And I will
Well,
tell
well,
you in
I
section
won't,
19.
I won't interrupt you, but you also must have the capacity and the capability
To do what America
to do
can
what
do.
America
Yes.
does.
So let me-
So we don't have it.
No, we do. Let me tell
Where,
you.
where do you have it? Military-wise or what?
I'm coming. The foreign policy objectives, that's section 19 of the Constitution, shall be A, promotion and protection of national interest. You promote by dialogue, you protect by sanction. There are economic sanctions, and then you come to this other aspect of sanction that you are questioning our capability.
Let's break it down. For
Right.
example, how are you going to sanction South Africa?
Good.
What would you be imposing on them? Is it an embargo on your oil? That's all you have. Do you export agricultural products? Rather, you buy your apples and
What
the
about
rest.
their investment
you buy,
in Nigeria?
Apart from MTN, what other investment? ShopRite and the rest.
No, they are not- they are not at the
MTN is the
rest.
biggest. I mean, Ambassador, you
How
probably want
much
to
does
I'm
MTN
supposed to moderate this and not.
How much does MTN generate for South Africa every day? As far back as 8 years ago, someone told me who was working with MTN that every day from only the sale of recharge card, they generate 1 billion. 8 years ago,
Yeah.
from the sale of recharge card every day. I remember Nigerians make calls, Nigerians send text messages, and there is this fraudulent and clandestine text they send to you. You have not subscribed to it, and then they deduct money from your pay.
So what are you going to do with MTN?
Right.
There are Nigerians who own shares.
It doesn't
there.
matter if they are
You'd-
if they are
you'd-
accessories.
you-
No, the point is, if South Africa as a government benefit or has interest, because Nigerian national interest does not necessarily have to be the interest of the nation. It can be the interest of the citizens in another nation. That's why they say the foreign policy shall be the protection of the national interest. Touch an American in Nigeria today and see how they react. to it.
Ambassador Jokeshi is looking at you.
Okay, I mean, I welcome the divergent view.
Okay, Ambassador.
Okay, you
maybe-
say our foreign policy is strong. Can we have the foreign policy? Can you articulate the foreign policy that are strong?
Look, when you talk of imposing economic sanctions, you don't do it in a way that hurts you at the end of the day.
So that means
You do it in a way that at the end of the day, you probably be the beneficiary as well. Because when the Shell, or was it
British
Shell
Petroleum.
was nationalized.
Standard Bank and
Bank
the rest,
and
Union
also-
Bank, or what were they
It
called?
opened up opportunities for the growth of indigenous
Businesses.
And as a matter of fact, we could actually trace the rise of indigenous banking and all, to that,
Absolutely.
Now today, what kind of sanction? Look, if it's okay, we're all talking of MTN and the rest. If you decide now
MTN
that
is
you
one
want
of them,
to,
but there are banks.
you want to nationalize,
I don't subscribe to that.
good. The problem for me is not the fault of MTN. The law is the law that gave MTN the right to operate. If I remember, and do correct me, you're a lawyer. I think said about 10 or 20 or how many years after, substantial part of the shares was to be sold to Nigerians. They're only just doing it now.
Yeah.
So as we speak, Nigerians also partially
Shareholders.
shareholders.
Yeah.
In some cases, I think some institutions in this country bought substantial, bought shares and so on.
So in essence, we are incapacitated in responding to this problem should the South African government be seen to be complicit. Is that what we are saying?
That's what you are putting on the
No. Look, I said we have measures we can take that will compel the South African government.
I asked you what economic measures? They don't buy your oil.
Look, even
oil
where
is
that is
the only commodity you have.
Even where I understand that there are some exports that are from here to South Africa. I understand that there are some exports, even some agricultural exports.
Right.
Now, if you ban them from going to South Africa, South Africans will probably find an alternative, but for a while, it is the Nigerian businesses that will suffer. You see, this goes back to what I said before. When we look at the mirror and look at this issue, we begin to see our own internal failures. Look, I made the point on this in this studio the last time I was here.
Yeah.
It took a generation, one prime minister to develop a country like Singapore over a period of 20-something, 30 years. The same thing in Malaysia. Here we are, almost 60 as an independent,
Right.
It's like we are just, despite all the progress,
we are still crawling.
We are still crawling.
We're still talking about potentials.
So
Nigeria has potential.
Good, so we cannot...
A child of 60 years.
We cannot and we must not discuss these problems without also looking at the internal dynamics or, what do you call it now, dimension that led to our people to be rushing out of the country and then getting themselves involved in street trading that is costing them their lives. Not
Anyway,
to talk,
in a global economy, you can never restrict the movement of people. There are Americans in England, there are English people in America. People will keep moving, goods will move, services will move. I do not believe, and I will not hold it, that the reason why Nigerians are all going out in droves is because there is a problem. It's also because they have found opportunities outside. If Nigeria is developed to a point where Nigeria looks like London, there are still Nigerians that will go out if the opportunities open outside.
Why would you want
so
to
here's
go
my,
out?
no, there are British people who are in America. Why are they in America? Because opportunities for them in their area of business.
You are talking of a group. Look at the nature of the people, Nigerians in South Africa. Look at the nature of Nigerians who are going through the desert, trying to reach Europe. Again, these are those who, like the migrants in South Africa, who feel that there's not enough opportunities for them in this country. Yet, we claim we are rich, yet we have the resources to build this country. But look, let's not divert attention to what we're trying to do in this country. The truth still remains that we must hold the South Africans accountable.
That's my point.
We must continue to work with other African countries to get South Africa to be reasonable and rational in dealing with this situation. We must get the South African leaders to rise up to the occasion. And they should use the language of Uche Chukwumeride, DK.
Yeah.
And, someone has to consistently remind them. And that's where we must praise Julius for what he's been trying to do. This is not the first time he will come out openly and make all these points.
That's true.
But beside him, even the police deputy minister who should be in the forefront, mobilizing the police, dealing with the situation, is incapable of doing that because he has a different mindset, more interested in protecting himself than acting like a real police chief to deal with this situation. So for me, we should continue to encourage the federal government to engage, to continue to engage the South Africans, to look for coalition of the willing and get the AU to put this issue on the table for discussion, either sooner or later. Somebody must call an emergency meeting of the AU to discuss this problem.
Absolutely. I was just going to ask you to round up on that note in 1 minute. An emergency session of the African Union is most needed at this time.
It will be a good idea. It will be a good idea. And also for the countries affected, countries whose nationals suffered in South Africa, to also be courageous enough to, to come up with...
Precisely.
All right, gentlemen, let me thank you most fervently. From my immediate left has been Daniel Bwala. He's a lawyer, he's a member of the Lincoln Inn, and of course I shouldn't forget the other one, that's a member of the APC.
You should say that loud, by the way.
I'm a proud member of the APC.
All right, and thanks so very much, like always, Ambassador Joe Keshi.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Thank you. Well, that's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Remember to join us again for a fresh edition tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, goodbye and thanks for watching.